Hey everyone, Elite Series Pro Bob Downey here, filling in for Polish Pete, and we're doing a rod bending series here with the Victory lineup from St. Croix. This particular one, 7.3 medium heavy fast bait casting rod. This is one of the most versatile rods, in my opinion, in St. Croix's lineup. I use this rod for several different techniques. It's become my preferred swim jig rod lately. I'll pair it up with 30 to 40 pound braid, and you can swim a jig in pretty much any sort of submergent or emergent type cover. I also love throwing a Texas rig on this rod on offshore cover, whether that's brush piles, grass lines, dragging on offshore rock and gravel on a weed edge. This is a really good rod for that. You can throw 4 to 6 inch swim baits on this rod, more of an open hook on a jig head, wind it across grass flats. You could throw it for shallow smallmouth in that 2 to 6 foot range on sand flats, that sort of deal. Just an extremely versatile rod. I love the handle on these Victories. They're super comfortable in hand. We're gonna do a quick rod bend here and show you guys why I like it for those techniques. All right, we got the 7.3 medium heavy fast in the Victory series. We're gonna do a quick rod bend here, show you guys the action, and then why I use this rod for those techniques. All right, here we go. So you can see that fast action brings that bend back into the medium to butt section of the rod. You know, an extra fast tip is going to be more in those first 3 to 4 guides there. So this thing, you could say it has a bit of a parabolic bend. It doesn't get bent all the way back to the handle here, which for throwing a swim jig, Texas rig, a swim bait, you know, you want a bit of a beefy back end here to really drive that hook. When I get a bite on a fast action rod that bends back into the middle of the tip or middle of the rod there, I tend to not lose as many fish on those type of baits. So it's got a great backbone to drive that hook, as you can see there. A nice semi-parabolic bend, I would call it, to keep those fish pinned. And in the Victory series, the material that they use is just a hair softer than some of their, let's say, a Legend Elite series of rods. It doesn't mean it's not sensitive or lightweight, but it's SC3 plus material. So the SC3 has always been a super fishy material with St. Croix, but the plus factor lightens up the rod a bit, creates a little bit more sensitivity. So it's a really nice rod for throwing those reaction style baits like a swim jig and a swim bait, but it's also sensitive enough where you can throw, you know, a 10-inch worm on a grass line. I threw this rod a couple years ago on Lake Fork, flipping 8 to 10 foot trees with a big worm, and it handled it perfectly. So the 7.3 medium heavy fast in the Victory series of rods, it's super versatile. You can do tons of different techniques for both largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass. Hey everyone, Bob Downey here, back at you with my second preferred rod that I have to have in the boat when I'm going bass fishing. This is a rod that I've used for years. They just revamped it a little bit. It's the Avid series from St. Croix. This is a 7-foot medium fast spinning rod. Extremely versatile rod, right? 7-foot medium fast. You can do so many things with it. My preferred technique is throwing a drop shot. I've thrown the Avid series in this particular length, model, and action with a drop shot for 10 plus years probably. They just reimagined this series. Little bit new logo, definitely a different handle here, and different material slightly. It's the SC3 plus material, so it's going to lighten up the blank a little bit more sensitive, but it still is soft in ways that you want it to be soft. And we'll explain that a little bit here when we do the rod bending series and show you on the wall behind us. But I use this drop shot wacky rig. You could throw small tubes with it, small swim baits. Extremely versatile rod. If you're looking for a bass rod in the spinning category that you can do a lot of things with, the St. Croix Avid 7-foot medium fast is definitely a go-to of mine. We're on the rod bending wall here, 7-foot medium fast in the Avid spinning series. We'll do a quick bend. As you guys can see, that medium action bends back behind this last guide here. So I would say that's a pretty true medium action in my eyes. reasons I like that for throwing a drop shot is typically you're using a slightly smaller hook, a little bit lighter gauge hook. I like to throw braid to a fluorocarbon leader, so that medium action is going to absorb any sort of, you know, dive at the boat that those fish are making on those light hooks, but also on the hook set too. You know, for me, it's just typically a nice light hook set and a reel into that fish, and this medium action just pins them perfectly with the braid and the no stretch braid. Another technique I like with this is throwing small swim baits, and reason being, you know, winding bait, reaction style bait, you want a little bit bigger bend all the way in the back of the rod, so when that fish grabs that bait, it absorbs it and gets the hook really good, doesn't pull it loose from its mouth. So 7-foot medium fast, like I said, this has been my go-to drop shot rod for years. I just got a lot of confidence in the SC3 material. It's a little bit softer than some of their higher end materials, but now that it's SC3 Plus, it lightens up this rod quite a bit and it makes it a little bit more sensitive. We were just on Lake Murray a couple weeks ago. I weighed 90% of my fish on this rod on a drop shot. And I'm really looking forward to using this rod when we go to smallmouth country too for throwing a drop shot. So if you want a versatile spinning rod at a great price point, and a rod that's been improved a bit from what it used to be, check out the 7-foot medium fast in the Avid series from St. Croix. All right, everyone, this is my third rod in my must-haves for bass fishing. This is more of a reaction style technique type rod. What do I mean by that? This is called the Rip and Chatter Legend Tournament Bass. This is a 7.2 heavy moderate. This is more of your composite type rod. There's some glass in this rod, there's some carbon in this rod. What I like about that, you know, versus just an all glass rod, when you you know, put a little bit of carbon in there, it's going to lighten it up and make it a hair more sensitive, and I think you're a little bit more accurate on small target casting situations. So if you're throwing a chatterbait around docks, you're throwing a chatterbait around little isolated, you know, grass clumps on the bank, you're a little bit more accurate. It's a little more responsive than just a full glass rod. It also lightens it up, as we talked about, so it's a little more pleasant to use when you're on the water 8 to 10 hours a day. So chatterbait, you know, great chatterbait rod, but you can also throw bigger square bills. So your 1.5, 2.0, 2.5 square bills, it's a great rod for that, thrown over grass flats or maybe clay points if you're down in the south on southern reservoirs. Another technique I really like this rod for is throwing topwater walking baits. I pair it with 30 to 40 pound braid, and I'll throw you know, your walking baits on shallow bars. If you're on the Tennessee River, if you're on the Mississippi River, you might throw it over sand flats. If you're on a natural lake, you might throw it over a grass flat in a post-spawn situation. But it's a really good topwater rod when you pair it with braid too. And we'll kind of show you what I mean by that. This has a really great parabolic bend, but it stiffens up a little bit in the butt section, which you need for throwing some of those baits. So let's get on the wall, we'll do a rod bend, and I'll show you why this is my third pick in my must-haves for bass fishing. All right, guys, we're here on the wall. We're gonna bend this rod, show you what we're working with the 7.2 heavy moderate in the Legend Tournament Bass. So we got a really nice bend all the way into the backbone here. In comparison to that medium heavy that, you know, kind of quit bending in the middle section of this rod, this thing gets all the way down to the handle. What I like about that, when you're throwing a bladed jig, that fish absorbs that bait a lot better. You have a better tendency to not only hook that fish, but land them. And let's say you're throwing a topwater with braid, you're dealing with treble hooks. That braid's going to allow you to throw that bait a lot further and get good hooks in it on a long cast, but you need a softer rod to fight that fish and land them. And this is a really good rod for that. You can see, like, once again, how far into the backbone that thing bends. We're dealing with a moderate action here. So all the way almost to the handle here is where that thing bends for us. It's going to allow you to really land those fish at a higher percentage. Lastly, square bills, once again, treble hook bait, more of a moderate action. Just a really good reaction bait type rod for us. You're not going to want to flip a jig with this or throw a Texas rig or drag a football jig. That's not what we're doing with this rod. This is more of a reaction bait rod where we're casting and winding those baits back at a good clip. It's the Rip and Chatter. Like we said, it has some glass in it, it has some carbon in it, so you get the effects of a glass rod, but it's a lot lighter and just a hair more sensitive. A really good rod for making tight roll casts around cover with a chatterbait, square bill, that sort of deal. So check it out. This is my third in my must-haves for fishing largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, and it's definitely one I have in my boat at all times.